Yeah.
In Schoenberg, in Berlin, in
Yeah, I see.
Michigan, and so on.
Yeah.
So we're waiting until that time. So
That's great. Well, how big a,
so
I mean...
actually, this is a bit before, you know, we're in the middle of pre-production, and but you came here.
Sure, take advantage, all right.
You come here each second year, something like that, when you're in tour. So.
Do I?
So the idea of this is to pick out some different points I have chosen
Yeah.
to talk about the time you met Iggy and so on.
Yeah.
But the idea how to do this is, I mean, it's more like you talk and I'll, you know, supply with questions in that sense that whatever comes into your mind of memories and so on, just go on talking, because in the film, these stories will be put up against archive material
Yeah.
and so on.
Yeah.
If you
Yeah.
can follow me.
Yeah, sure. Sure. It's difficult to know. I mean...
My first question...
Yes, get me started.
Get you started, right? I want to know exactly, when did you first hear the Stooges, Iggy and the Stooges, before you met him?
That's it was such a long time ago, it's quite hard to... I think... Yeah, it was definitely the very early 70s. And I believe I got the albums on one of my first trips to America. It comes out of a strange story, actually, I think. There was a club in New York called the Electric Garden, was it? Possibly. And I know that now subsequently it's closed down. And there was a gig there in around 70, 71, I guess. And it was the Velvet Underground, and they were working down there. And so I went down to the show, and it was about there's only a handful of people watching the band, because in those days, as usual with the Velvets, and in some ways with Jim, that the audience recognition was very slow to follow their actual work. It didn't come until much later, generally. And I was watching there, and I was singing along with the band because I knew all the songs. And then during the interval, I went to talk with Lou Reed. And he came to the door, and I only had a vague idea of what Lou looked like, and he looked sort of what I imagined him to look like. And we talked for about half an hour, and I told him how influential his work had become on me and all that. Real fan stuff, you know. And then he went back inside, and it was 3 days later, and I found out that Lou had left the band. I said, well, who's the guy I was talking to? This was Doug Yule, who'd joined the band in Lou's stead. So that was my first impression of musical America. And during that same trip, the guy who was kind of wheeling me around town, he was sort of showing me New York, introduced me to Iggy's albums, the Stooges albums. And I bought the first two. I think there were 2 albums out already by then. And that's, I guess, the first time I really heard his work.
And how did you find it? Because, I mean, at that time, I read some reviews from those 2 records, and one review said that this was geniusly moronic music. That's how he put it, which I find it maybe at that time.
Well, yeah, I mean, tempered by the fact that I worked with Jim so much subsequently to that. I appreciate that what in fact he is writing is the great American late 20th century novel, but he's writing it in musical form. I got to appreciate him as being one of the great lyricists in America. I think that he's ironic, moving, poignant, dangerous, hostile. He contains a wealth of expression in the way that he puts words together. And there's a lot of work that's moronic, but it doesn't have the resonance of Jim's kind of moronic.
No, I understand you. So, eventually you met up with Iggy at one point in New York.
Yeah.
Could you tell that story somehow from the beginning?
I felt like the butterfly at the first ball, because I was going to Max's Kansas City, which was sort of a legendary club in Britain, in the underground anyway, and still kind of a legend in America, although it was, I don't know if that was its high point around then. I guess it would have been pretty much so. Warhol was still going there, and a lot of the artists were still going there. And I went there the night that Lou Reed and Iggy were both actually at the club. And we just sat at the table. I think, really, I was too nervous with both of them, and I think they were fairly nervous with each other. I sensed there was a great sense of competition between Lou and Iggy, which I found funny. And delightful, of course, being the English tourist. You know. And I just felt sort of in the middle of it all. Nothing much came out of it. I mean, it was kind of if I remember rightly, it was a fairly dull evening. Anyhow, I got to know them both after that.
Yeah, so you during that same stay, you met up with Iggy later on, didn't you?
Yeah, I must have done. It all starts to get very hazy after that.
Okay, because your manager picked up Iggy somehow and helped him get a new contract, a new record contract.
I don't know if my ex-manager helped him do anything at all, actually. If he helped him the same way he helped me, then...
But eventually, Iggy went to London to record, didn't he?
Yeah. He went to London to record. The anecdotal side of this thing is I'm not very good at, because my memories of the middle 70s and early 70s are not very good, and I'm not terribly good on anecdotes.
No.
I'm more concerned with the process of how things got done, and why Jim writes and how he wrote. That always interested me more,
yes,
I think.
Yes.
I tend not to be very good on the past or the future. Much better now, about now. So if you want to move into the actual writing, I think it'd be better.
Yes, because then you hooked up. You started actually playing with Iggy. When did that start? It started in Los Angeles, didn't it?
Yeah, let me see. Yeah, we started fooling around. Oh, for real, I think. I mean, I did a couple of things. I remember just in a straightforward mixing capacity, which weren't terribly. Had very little to do with me. There was a thing that I mixed with Jim called Raw Power, which is a wonderful album, great album. But my input into that was not terribly great. I just fooled around with the faders, putting them up and down more than anything else. But I think things got fairly serious when we went to Berlin. Both of us were having a bad situation with America, with drugs and our lifestyles and all that. And I think in our own separate ways we wanted to change our lives somewhat. So we ended up getting places in Berlin. And that became almost a haven of creativity for a while there. I mean, it was spectacularly creative for both of us. I think we were so inspired by being that near to East Europe, being at this kind of cultural crossroads of Europe. I think you get those blast moments where you can walk down the street and it seems as though the history of the world comes through you from the past and into the future, just for a millisecond, and it's those moments that one felt very strongly at that time. And I started working with Jim on an album called The Idiot, and that's when I was really, it really became apparent to me what a great writer he was in terms of his lyrics. He was so spontaneous. I mean, he would possibly how I might have. How the collaboration might have worked is that I would come up generally with the musical side of things. I guess I'd work very hard on kinds of maybe supportive chord structures and things that Jim could use. And then we would talk about one-word definitions of the sound, what it inspired, what kind of image it put in our minds, and we go backwards and forwards, and then we come up with 2 or 3 words that were really the kernel of what the thing felt like. And then Jim would just run off and start writing stuff down. I mean, it would take him maybe 10 minutes to put a really first-class lyric together. I mean, it was just extraordinary. And I loved working with Jim very much because of that, because it was always so fast and immediate and spontaneous. It was never a drawn-out kind of thing.
Where in the world did this take place, The Idiot, the recording of The Idiot?
When?
No, where in the world?
Where in the world?
Yes.
Between Paris, Berlin, and Switzerland, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think those are the 3 locations for him.
So you actually did it in your own studio, or some studio you had access to very
Oh
locally?
God, I can't remember. I really can't remember.
No.
I really can't remember the studio.
But that's okay. But it's just the atmosphere. It was like you were just you and 3 or 4 musicians. It was not very big.
Nothing that nothing that I did with Jim was a huge event in that way. In fact, the last thing that we did together, Blah Blah Blah, there were virtually just me, Jim, and a couple of synthesizers and a guitar player. I think it was that small a thing, and it was unfortunately. It was not liked as an album critically. It didn't get very good press, but I think listening back to it, it was an extraordinary album. The tracks, Blah 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 itself, and there are a couple of other, Wild Child on it, they were fabulous tracks.
Yes.
I think there's some good stuff on Blah.
That's when I caught on to Iggy first.
Oh really?
Yeah.
On the Blah 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 album?
Yeah.
Well, it's good to know somebody was brought into his world
I think
on that album.
Quite a lot were here in Europe. And in
Yeah.
Denmark.
Oh, that. Yeah. Possibly. That's good.
But of course it was via your name, but it was still, who is this guy?
Yeah, I think probably that was something that was unsettling for Jim, is that my name came up so much with the way that we worked in those days, you know, because at the time I was having a considerable commercial success ever since I was very lucky from the early 70s onwards in that way, and I think it was probably wearing Jim down that my name constantly came up, because we've talked a little about that subsequently. I think we want to work together again, but I think we'd be allowed to work together if the public and the press would allow. I think the public don't have a problem, it's always the press, in a far more equal manner in terms of profile, and that would be something I would like a lot, because I like working with him very much.
Let me just go back to the Berlin days. He also did Lost for Life.
Yeah.
And Lost for Life,
Thank you.
he was more musical in charge, I have read somewhere. I don't know if that's the case. Or were you also very much
That's
involved?
difficult to say. He was working with a band that he'd been working with for a little while, which was different to Idiot. The Sales Brothers were guys that he'd been on the road with, and so were familiar with his way of working. But writing-wise, it was pretty much the same kind of thing. And some of it was fairly cute. I mean, there was Lust for Life itself, for instance. The tune, well, while we were living in Berlin, we would tune into AFN for the news every day. That was the only English-speaking channel, was the American Forces Network. And the ding 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 was the signature tune for the AFN News. So we thought that was pretty appropriate. So we put drums behind it, and that became Lust for Life. You might want to get a copy of the AFN jingle from the late 70s. I'm sure AFN will give it to you. Sure. But we used a lot of the actual daily life of Berlin. It became part of the pattern of writing. You know.
It seems to me that now we are on Lost for Life, the tune, the actual tune. It seems to me when I listen and read the lyrics that it's kind of a paste up. It seems so built in. Is that true?
What, lyrically you mean?
Yeah.
As far as I can remember, it was pretty immediate again. I mean, Jim was spectacularly, I can't tell you how spectacularly fast he is in coming up with the lyric. It's almost a stream of consciousness with Jim. He might lock in a couple of phrases immediately and then maybe spend 10 minutes thinking about it, then go back to the microphone and redo the thing, and it comes out virtually complete. There's no gestation period. There's no rumination. I mean, it's immediate response to a situation, which is, I guess, you know, is almost in the, that's almost in the tradition of the great beat poets of America, the Jack Kerouacs and, you know, Jack Cassidy, Neil Cassidy rather, and Ferlinghetti and all that. You know, it's that kind of approach to writing.
And then Iggy went on. Then you actually went separate music-wise for a period of time, didn't you?
After Blah Blah Blah, which would be around mid-80s. Oh, I'm sorry, Blah. Let me see. Oh, I can't remember. I don't know what happened. It's difficult. I guess Let's Dance happened. That must have been...
That's not much later, though. That's,
yeah.
And then you...
Oh, earlier then. Oh, well, earlier I went to America. I left Berlin. Right, that's what must have happened, because I think Jim stayed on in Berlin when I left. I went for two reasons. I wanted to... I'd been offered a part in a play in America, an Elephant Man, and I really wanted to do it. There was a chance to do theatre in America, and I really wanted to do that. So I took that, and I started working on the Scary Monsters album simultaneously. So those two things sort of happened. And I guess that's possibly where we separated for a while. And then, for me, after Elephant Man, a number of other things, the Let's Dance thing happened, so I was on world tours and all that. And really, our paths just didn't cross until maybe I guess the mid-80s again, somewhere. You tell me. You probably know better than I do.
Yeah. Now then, it's because what I can read when I read all the articles and all the books I've been into and all this, Iggy was feeling quite worn out by being a rock musician. He wanted to go into something else in some ways. And he's also stated that to different people in his entourage and his friends and so on. And
you'll have to ask Jim about that.
Yeah.
Those kinds of things, I would never talk for Jim.
No, of course not.
You don't understand?
No,
it's
of
no.
course
Yeah.
you shouldn't. I'm just trying to...
But I do know, the only thing that I would not talk for him, but I think you'll probably find that he's in agreement with me, is that there was a period, even in the late 70s, where he was talking about writing serious fiction, that he considered writing just prose without the music, writing maybe poems or working towards a novel or some such form, which I would do nothing but encourage, because I think he would be a magnificent prose writer. And I think probably he will do that eventually. But that's the only talking for him I would do.
Okay. I was thinking... You have to go now? Okay.
I'm sorry.
Okay. Let me just then ask you about Little China Girl, which was one you did on The Idiot. You covered that on Let's Dance.
Yes, yeah.
And that became quite a big hit, and that has somehow supported you in ways of royalties.
Oh, I guess maybe on a financial level it might have helped a little, but Jimmy supports himself. I mean, he tours.
Sure. No, I know. But
But
he actually left the scene for 3 years, and then he made Blah Blah Blah, and then you picked it up.
Yeah.
Could you talk about?
Well,
I
mean,
and then the Blah 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 album.
You know, doing some of the songs that we wrote together was always something that, you know, however idealist your motives are as a producer, if you're involved in the writing of something and you're a performer, I think there's something itching inside yourself to actually want to do the thing as well. So as much as Jimmy did China Girl, I always wanted to do it as well, because I always loved the tune. I thought it was a good tune. And of course Jimmy's lyrics were fantastic. I adored them. But I've done that with a few of the things that we wrote together. I don't know what I can say about that. I mean, China Girl was very representative of the state of mind that we were probably both in Berlin.
Yes. And then Blah Blah Blah, when did you first hear that? When did you first... He made some demos, I think, and then he presented it to you. Or they played it for you.
The only demo that he had that he played me was Winners and Losers, with James playing guitar on that one. But the rest of it we wrote up in Gstaad, up in the mountains. I was really starting to get into little synthesizer things in a major way at that point. And the only time I'd worked with synthesizers before with Jim was on The Idiot, where I'd written this thing that became mass production on that album, which was kind of very strange, very kind of bizarre piece of music. But I'd gotten these little kind of microcomputer things. Everything was tiny, so I had a full studio of equipment on the table up in, because we both were skiing by that time. We both became ski bums for a week. And And so I laid all this stuff out on the table, and so we had a tiny little studio on the kitchen table, and we just sort of write on all the equipment. You have to ask Jim, but I don't remember any other demos. The only song that I remember is Winners and Losers, yeah.
Okay.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Thanks very much.
Shall we stop now?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I have to go and be a band.